Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to dive into a truly ancient text that, believe it or not, holds some incredibly powerful advice for our super modern lives.
But let's just start with this one question. Can 7 words, just 7, actually change your life? I know it sounds kind of impossible, right? But that is the exact promise hidden inside what we're talking about today.
To get how, we have to travel back in time, and I mean way back. About 2,000 years ago, a poet in South India created something absolutely extraordinary. What he put together was basically a guide to living a good, ethical life. But here's the kicker. It wasn't tied to any specific religion or god or sect. Nope, it was meant to be completely universal, for everyone. So what is this thing?
It's called the Thirukkural, and it was written by a poet and philosopher named Thiruvalluvar.
But what the sources make absolutely clear is that he created something with incredible longevity.
Very true.
We are talking about a text older than most medieval European or Indian literature.
It represents some of the earliest recorded Tamil thought, and it really showcases a highly developed intellectual culture in South India over 2 millennia ago.
Yeah.
But what truly sets it apart, and what makes it a subject of endless academic study, is its structural genius. The Thirukkural is composed of 1,330 couplets.
Which is called Kurals, right?
Yes, Kurals. And every single one of these Kurals is written in a strict Tamil poetic meter called Kural Venba.
Now, for those of us who aren't experts in ancient Tamil linguistics, which is probably most of us, what does that actually look like in practice?
Think of it like a haiku, but instead of counting syllables, it's about metrical rhythm. The Kural Venba dictates that every single couplet must be exactly 7 metrical words long in Tamil.
Just 7.
Just 7. You have 4 words in the first line and 3 words in the second line. It forces the writer to strip away absolutely every unnecessary thought. There is 0 room for exposition.
That constraint is just wild to me.
It is severe.
Think about it like a perfectly crafted tweet, but instead of a hot take on a movie, you are getting profound philosophical, musical, and timeless depth.
Very good way to put it.
Achieving that level of emotional subtlety and moral universality in just 7 metrical units, it really is the ultimate economy of language.
And what's fascinating here is that despite being written in antiquity, the Thirukkural is completely secular.
Which is rare for that time period.
Incredibly rare. It provides a complete manual for ethical living without relying on any religious dogma. It doesn't name specific gods, it has no sectarian theology, and there is no mythological storytelling to lean on for allegorical padding. This restraint is a huge part of its poetic power.
Because of this universality, Thiruvalluvar's ethical manual is embraced by Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Jains, Buddhists, and secular scholars alike.
It focuses purely on moral living beyond caste, creed, or sect.
I love that. It bypasses all the usual tribalism and just offers straight-up wisdom for how to be a functional, good human.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about what's actually in it. The entire work is organized into 3 main books, which cover what Thiruvalluvar saw as the 3 great pillars of a complete life. And those pillars are virtue, or aram, wealth, or poral, and love, or inbam. Now, what's really interesting is that the biggest section, by far, is dedicated to poral, which covers everything from politics and economics to just social life. So you see, this isn't just a book of personal morals. It's a blueprint for how to build a just society.
Can an ancient text really offer a moral compass for our modern crises? Let's dig in.
Look, our world is facing some huge challenges right now. Let's break them down. First, we have armed conflicts, which cause just immense instability and human suffering.
We're also seeing authoritarian rule on the rise, crushing freedoms and basic human rights.
Then there's greed and corruption, which are creating these massive gaps in wealth.
And on top of all that, environmental damage is putting our shared future completely at risk. You know, these problems aren't random. They're rooted in things like fear, greed, and broken systems. It all begs the question, right? With all this going on, where do we turn for guidance?
Well, the answer might just lie in timeless wisdom, like the ancient text, the Thirukkural. And check this out. It has direct guidance for our biggest modern problems. It's pretty incredible. It provides a clear framework for good leadership, a direct counter to authoritarian rule.
It also champions justice and compassion as the perfect antidote to discrimination and inequality.
Its core message is pretty simple. Virtue is the absolute foundation of life. Sure, wealth is great, but only if you earn it and use it ethically. And love? It's a noble, natural experience. Ultimately, It champions timeless values like nonviolence, truthfulness, justice, and compassion. Overcoming the extreme perils of our modern world really requires returning to these universal ethical foundations to counteract all that systemic greed and corruption.
To really grasp the gravity of this, before we even look at what the text says, we have to look at the sheer scale of its global footprint. Because this isn't some obscure text just sitting in a regional archive somewhere.
Far from it.
As of early 2025, the Thirukkural has been translated into over 60 languages worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah, it is the most translated Tamil text in existence and one of the most translated non-religious works on the planet.
The linguistic spread is just staggering when you really dig into it. I mean,
Yeah.
we are talking about 28 different Indian languages.
Right, like Hindi.
Telugu, Bengali, Marathi, yeah. And then you look at the 35 international languages. French, German, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, Persian. It has, it's infiltrated almost every major linguistic hemisphere.
And the momentum is actually accelerating, right?
Yes, very much so. There is an active project aiming to expand this to all 193 UN-recognized languages.
That's massive.
Just recently, in March of 2025, there was this massive push commissioned for 28 additional translations across Asia, Africa, and Europe.
Translating a Kural feels like trying to, I don't know, take apart a complex Swiss watch and then trying to rebuild it using differently shaped gears.
That is the perfect analogy.
If you force the pieces to fit, you lose the rhythm. If you change the pieces entirely, the watch just stops keeping time.
Exactly. Translators of this text are facing a nearly impossible task. They have to somehow balance four incredibly delicate competing elements all at once.
And those are?
Well, first, they have to preserve the literal meaning so the actual philosophy remains intact. Second, they have to capture the poetic rhythm so it still feels like art.
Which is hard enough on its own.
Right. Third, they have to maintain the profound philosophical depth. And finally, they have to carry over the specific cultural nuances of ancient Tamil into languages that have completely different historical contexts.
Which perfectly explains why there isn't just one definitive English translation.
No, not at all.
The sources show dozens of different scholars attempting to crack this code, and it resulted in wildly different translation philosophies. You basically have this centuries-long tension between literalism and poetry. Take G.U. Pope back in 1886.
Pope's work is a great starting point for this. He provided one of the earliest full English translations, but he was viewing it through a very specific cultural lens.
Very Victorian, right?
Extremely Victorian. His version is dripping in that style of English, accompanied by these massive detailed notes. He was really trying to package this ancient Tamil wisdom in a way that the Western academic establishment of the 1800s would respect and digest.
But then you look at what Reverend W.H. Drew and Reverend John Lazarus did, and they went the complete opposite route.
Oh, totally different approach.
They looked at that Swiss watch, decided the poetry was getting in the way of the truth, and just stripped it all down.
Yeah, they created a highly literal translation.
They sacrificed the rhythmic beauty just to ensure they were being aggressively faithful to the original meaning. They famously called the text a masterpiece of ethical wisdom.
And of course, this tradition continues today with highly acclaimed modern renditions, like the one by Thomas Satoshi Pruxma. Really kicks off with a figure we can think of as the Latin catalyst, Costanzo Giuseppe Besci.
Right, an Italian missionary scholar living from 1680 to 1747. He becomes deeply immersed in Tamil culture, and he is one of the very first Europeans to recognize the absolute genius of this text. So what does he do? He translates it into Latin.
Which was the absolute masterstroke.
Why?
Because in the 18th century, Latin was the skeleton key to the European intellectual world. By translating the Thirukkural into Latin, Besci bypassed all those regional dialects and served the text directly to the most influential thinkers of the West.
Ah, that makes sense.
He even explicitly compared his universal moral wisdom to the classical Western traditions of Greece and Rome. He was so deeply respected by the Tamil people for his dedication that they actually bestowed upon him the name Veeramamunivar, meaning courageous saint.
So Veeramamunivar puts it into Latin, and the text begins to quietly weave its way through Europe. Eventually, a German translation is produced, and that specific German translation finds its way to Russia, landing on the desk of Leo Tolstoy.
And this is where the ideological impact just explodes.
Yeah, because Tolstoy was not just a novelist.
Right, he was a profound Christian anarchist. He was constantly searching for universal truths regarding nonviolence and moral purity. So when he reads the text, which he refers to as the Hindu Kural, he is absolutely captivated by it.
The principles of nonviolence and love articulated in those 7-word couplets perfectly aligned with his own emerging worldview.
Exactly. But Tolstoy doesn't just read it and put it on a shelf. He actively weaponizes the philosophy. He writes a profoundly influential document called A Letter to a Hindu, where he passionately promotes the teachings of the Kural.
And the recipient of that letter is none other than a young Mahatma Gandhi.
Talk about a historical collision. Gandhi reads Tolstoy's letter, absorbs the philosophy, and it becomes a foundational element in his own ideological development. Gandhi later refers to the Thirukkural as a textbook of indispensable authority on moral life.
Oh wait, let me jump in here. Gandhi obviously had the Bhagavad Gita. Tolstoy had the Bible. These are massive foundational religious texts that already preach morality and peace. What did a tiny 7-word Tamil micropoem give these two titans of history that their own towering religious texts didn't?
That is the crucial question right there. Religious texts, by their very nature, carry the weight of specific theology, mythology, and dogma. They belong to a specific tradition.
Right.
What the Thirukkural provided was an entirely secular, rational foundation for those exact same moral truths. It argued for nonviolence and virtue, not because a specific deity commanded it, but because it is the most logical, natural state of human flourishing.
It offered an objective ethical truth that wasn't bogged down by sectarian boundaries. That same realization echoed by other massive historical figures in your sources.
Well, absolutely.
Albert Schweitzer read it and concluded that there hardly exists in world literature a collection of maxims with such lofty wisdom. Perrier, the social activist, revered it specifically because it was a great rationalistic work.
Yes.
Eringar Anna championed it as a rational, universal, and secular moral code. And Kalayangar Karunanidhi described it perfectly when he called it a universal common creed that transcends time, language, and religion. So a text that starts as an ultra-restrictive ancient poem travels through Italian missionaries, sparks a revelation in a Russian novelist, and helps shape the nonviolent philosophy of India's founding father.
It's a movie script, honestly. Physical monuments built in honor of the author, Thiruvalluvar, are staggering, both in their scale and their symbolism.
Take the Kanyakumari statue in Tamil Nadu, which was completed in the year 2000. It stands on a rock in the ocean, and it is exactly 133 feet tall. And that number is not an accident.
No, it corresponds perfectly to the 133 chapters of the Thirukkural.
But the brilliance is in the proportions.
Yes. The base of the statue, the pedestal it stands on, is exactly 38 feet high. This represents the first 38 chapters of the text, which are entirely dedicated to arum or virtue.
And the statue itself, the figure of Thiruvalluvar standing on top of that base, is 95 feet tall. That represents the remaining chapters, which focus on poral, meaning wealth, and inbam, meaning love.
The architectural design is literally teaching the book's core lesson in physical space. It is demonstrating that wealth and love must always be built upon a solid foundation of virtue. Yeah, if you try to build 95 feet of wealth and love without the 38-foot foundation of virtue, the entire structure collapses. The stone itself is preaching the philosophy.
That's incredible. It is one of the tallest statues of a poet-philosopher on Earth. But it's not the only one. You have Velluvar Kodam in Chennai, built in 1976. This isn't just a statue, it's an enormous monument shaped like a classical temple chariot.
Right, and it houses a 4,000-seat auditorium.
But the detail that absolutely floors me is that all 1,330 Kurals are physically engraved into the granite pillars of the monument.
It is widely considered the largest monument dedicated to a poet in all of India.
You can find statues of Thiruvalluvar globally, in London, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Australia.
Yet, despite being carved into literal monoliths, the text is uniquely suited for the digital age. It is thriving in modern media formats.
Absolutely. You have beautifully illustrated children's books breaking down the ethics. There are animated stories on YouTube teaching the moral lessons to a new generation. Modern corporations use adapted editions for leadership and management training.
And there are mobile apps that put the Tamil text, multiple English translations, audio recitations, and expert commentary right in your pocket.
It's a beautiful paradox. The text was engineered with such extreme brevity that it fits perfectly onto the screen of a modern smartphone or smartwatch.
It's estimated that over 300 distinct books have been written in the Tamil language alone just to provide commentaries, historical context, and philosophical interpretations of these couplets.
300 books just to explain a 7-word poem framework.
Yeah, and the culture celebrates this actively, especially during the festival of Pongal, where Thiruvalluvar Day is marked by public recitations and poetry contests. It is a living, breathing part of the global lexicon.
If we bring all of this back to you, the listener, there is a very practical takeaway here. We are currently living in an era of unprecedented information overload. Every day we are bombarded with endless data, long-form think pieces, 20-minute voice notes, and infinite social media feeds. The signal-to-noise ratio in our daily lives is completely out of balance.
We're drowning in words but starving for meaning.
Exactly.
What the Thirukkural proves, quite mathematically, is that the most impactful knowledge has absolutely nothing to do with volume. True profoundness is about distillation. The ideas that survive centuries, the ideas that cross oceans and inspire revolutions, are the ones that have been refined down to their absolute clearest essence.
Have you ever come across a book that holds a whole universe of wisdom in just 2 lines? We're talking about the Thirukkural, written by the great sage Thiruvalluvar. And that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. How do you unlock wisdom that's so short but so incredibly deep? Well, it turns out there are a few keys to doing just that. Okay, first things first, you have to approach the Kurals a little differently than other books. It's less like reading a story and, more like staring up at the stars. A whole universe of thought contained in that tiny space of 2 lines. Inside those 2 little lines, you're not just getting one thing. You're getting an ethical principle, a poetic image, and a piece of real, practical advice, all rolled into one. So, with all that meaning crammed into such a small space, where do you even start? How do you unpack it? That's where our toolkit comes in. We've boiled down the approach into a few essential keys to help you unlock the text's hidden depths. So here's our roadmap. We'll start by finding the core idea and seeing how it's compressed. Then we'll look at the artistic stuff, like the imagery and the sound of the words. And finally, we'll connect it to the bigger picture, thinking about its universal wisdom and all the hidden layers. It's a full spectrum approach to really appreciating it. Let's zoom in on a couple of these keys, starting with that idea of compression. Thiruvalluvar had this absolutely incredible talent for layering meaning. He could weave a moral principle, a real-world example, and a universal truth all into that tiny 2-line structure. This is why it's really helpful to think of each curl as a seed. The text gives you the potential, but the real growth, the expansion into a whole tree of understanding, that happens when you plant it in your own mind and just let yourself think about it. And that connection to nature, that's another huge key. Thiruvalluvar is constantly using the world around us, rain, oceans, mountains, and, yes, seeds, as these powerful metaphors that make really complex ideas about us, about human behavior, feel totally natural and easy to grasp. All right, so we have the keys. Now let's actually try to unlock something. We're going to walk through how you can use this framework for pretty much any Kural you come across. So when you first read a Kural, the first step is always to just cut through the poetry and ask yourself a really simple question. What's the absolute core message here? What is Thiruvalluvar really trying to get at? But here's the thing. The answer isn't always obvious. The topic on the surface is often just the beginning. A Kural might seem to be about a simple act of kindness, but its deeper message, it could be about the very foundation of how a society even works. It's all about finding that universal principle inside a specific example. Okay, so once you have that core idea, the next key is to sort of test it. You ask, does this wisdom still hold up? How does it connect to our world, into my life, right here, right now? And what's amazing is, the answer is almost always a resounding yes. This is where the Thirukkural gets its power. Its lessons on leadership or friendship or just being a decent person are just as real for a 21st century CEO or a high school student as they were for someone 2,000 years ago. But the great thing is, you don't have to do all this heavy lifting by yourself.
To unlock those hidden depths, we'd be totally lost without the traditional scholars, right?
Oh, without a doubt. The commentaries are absolutely key. And the sheer global and historical reach of these commentators, proves how enduring the work is. You have ancient Tamil commentators like Paramalazagar.
Who really set the standard for the philosophical nuances.
Exactly. And then later scholars like Muvaradarasanar, Kalinga Karunanidhi, and poet Veramuthu.
And it goes beyond Tamil scholars, too.
It does. You have English commentators stepping in like G.U. Pope, Reverend William Hoyles, Drew
Rajaji as well.
Right, and Thomas Hitoshi Prixma, who all dedicated themselves to bringing that two-line mastery to new audiences.
Examples of chorales. Now that we have discussed about Thirukkural, its relevance, global presence, and how to read chorales, unlock and understand them, it's time we look at some example chorales. These chorales illustrate how timeless and relevant these teachings remain even today. The moral depth and literary elegance that have made this work enduringly influential, the beauty and practical wisdom of this remarkable work, universal truths about life and human behavior. The following examples are arranged by the three major categories: 1. Virtue. 2. Wealth/polity. 3. Love. These examples are intended to give you the little taste for this remarkable work and hopefully inspire you to take a more extensive look and duly benefit from the wisdom it provides. Now let's look at the section 1, Virtue. The first section of the Thirukkural is devoted to virtue, aram. In these chapters, Thiruvalluvar explains the moral principles that guide a righteous life. The verses emphasize values such as truthfulness, compassion, gratitude, humility, and self-discipline. Through these teachings, the poet shows that virtue is the foundation upon which both personal happiness and social harmony are built. Valluvar blends personal virtue with social duty, suggesting that morality is both inward and outward. A virtuous individual contributes positively to society. Valluvar's ethics are both prescriptive and descriptive. They tell how humans should live while reflecting observations of human behavior and society. Without further ado, now let's look at some examples under section Virtue.
You know, what's really interesting is where the Kural begins. It doesn't jump into some heavy, abstract philosophy. Nope. It starts with the most basic, foundational thing for all of us: nature. And specifically, something we all need to survive: rain.
We are going right to the foundation of life, which this text beautifully frames around the concept of rain.
Yes.
There is a specific Kural, Kural 12, that focuses entirely on the blessings of rain. The English translation reads, "Rain produces man's wholesome food. Rain itself forms part of his food besides."
Tupparka tuppaya, tuppake tupparka, tuppaya tu marai.
This couplet is just so simple and elegant, isn't it? It presents this really beautiful idea about rain's place in our lives. But what's it really saying? What's the deeper meaning here? So get this. The Kural is pointing out that rain plays a dual role. It's not just helping grow our food. In a way, it is our food. It nourishes the crops, for sure, but it also nourishes us directly. I mean, we're mostly water, right? It's such a simple but totally profound way of seeing our connection to the natural world.
And here's where it gets even cooler. The original Tamil poetry is just as powerful as the message itself. The word for nourishment, tupu, gets repeated, and it creates this amazing musical rhythm.
Tupparka tuppaya, tuppake tupparka, tuppaya tu marai.
It's not just a statement, it's a piece of art that really drives home just how vital rain is.
Okay, so that's the good side. But the Kural also flips the coin and asks, well, what happens when that gift is taken away? And check out the metaphor here. It's so powerful. Rain is described as the wealth of the clouds. And if that wealth is withheld, the whole human economy, which was built on farming for thousands of years, just stops.
We usually think of wealth as something locked in a vault, right? Gold, currency, stock portfolios.
Things you hoard.
Exactly. But this ancient text fundamentally redefines wealth as a natural, fluid resource. The clouds are essentially the banks, and their currency is water. Without that specific wealth being freely distributed, human industry halts entirely.
The soil cannot be
The
cultivated.
foundation of society cracks.
ஏரின் உழார் உழவர் புயல் என்னும் வாரி வலங்குன்றிக்கால்.
All right, so after grounding us in the natural world, the Kural takes a turn inward. It basically says, okay, the world around you is important, but a good life really begins with the world inside you, inside your own mind.
I mean, wow. This is such a powerful idea, right? The Kural just cuts through all the noise. It says true virtue isn't about these big, showy, public displays of goodness. Nah, it's about what's going on in your head. A pure mind, that's the real deal. Everything else, it's just for show.
It completely dismantles superficiality. It argues that true virtue has absolutely nothing to do with public relations or managing your reputation. It is entirely about cultivating a faultless mind.
Substance over show.
Exactly. If your internal motivations are selfish, greedy, or vain, then any showy action you take on the outside, no matter how helpful it looks to society, is just meaningless posturing.
மனத்துக்கண் மாசிலனாதல் அனைத்தரன் ஆகுல நீரபிற.
It feels incredibly pointed when you apply it to today's culture.
Oh, absolutely.
We spend an enormous amount of time curating our lives, especially online, trying to signal to everyone else how virtuous we are. We want people to see us caring about the right causes or doing the right deeds.
But this philosophy essentially calls all of that out.
It's as if your mind isn't clean, all of that outward performance is completely empty.
Great.
It challenges you to ask a very uncomfortable question. Are you doing the right thing because it is inherently right, or are you doing it for the audience?
And that internal purity is presented as the absolute prerequisite for everything else. You cannot reverse engineer virtue by doing good deeds with a corrupt mindset.
Because eventually it bleeds through.
Eventually, the impurity in the mind taints the outward action. The text demands that we do the hard, invisible, entirely uncelebrated work of cleaning up our internal thoughts first.
Right.
Only then can we genuinely engage with other people.
And you can see just how much this inner quality matters when you look at our closest relationships. This verse is it's incredibly touching. It says that a mother's greatest joy isn't even the moment her child is born. It's the moment she hears that her child is known for their wisdom, a true virtue that comes from within.
It is a brilliant commentary on societal value systems.
ஈன்ற பொழுதின் பெரிதுவக்கும் தன் மகனைச் சான்றோன் எனக் கேட்ட தாய்.
Think about it. The birth of a child is biologically and emotionally one of the most monumental peaks in a human life.
Of course.
The joy a mother feels at that moment is universal. Yet the text argues there is a joy that eclipses even that biological milestone.
A greater joy.
That greater joy occurs when the community recognizes her child not just for surviving, but for acquiring wisdom and moral worth.
It completely flips the script on what we typically celebrate.
Right.
In so many ways, modern culture celebrates mere existence or status or accumulating wealth.
Right.
But this argues that acquiring wisdom is the only true cause for celebration. The mother's ultimate joy is seeing that the child she brought into the world has successfully cultivated that pure mind and that selfless love we were just discussing.
It is the validation of their moral life, not just their physical life.
Validation of the moral life. I love that.
She brings the physical life into the world, but the child must build their own moral architecture. When the community recognizes that wisdom, it is the proof that true human wealth has been generated.
If virtue really starts inside your mind, how does it actually show up in the real world? Well, according to the Kural, one of the absolute highest expressions of a good heart is hospitality, how you welcome other people into your life.
I want to look at chapter 9, Kural 81.
இருந்தோம்பி இல்வாழ்வதெல்லாம் விருந்தோம்பி வேளாண்மை செய்தற் பொருட்டு.
Which centers entirely on the concept of hospitality.
A fascinating chapter.
According to this couplet, the entire purpose of maintaining a home, living a householder life, and accumulating wealth is simply to welcome guests and perform acts of generous kindness.
Yeah.
The translation reads, the life of cherishing and being at home for cherishing guests with generosity.
This is a radical departure from the modern consensus on property and wealth.
Completely.
Today, a home is almost universally viewed as a private fortress. It is the place you retreat to lock the doors and escape the world.
It's your sanctuary, away from everyone else.
Right. Wealth is seen as a tool to increase your own personal comfort, security, and isolation. But Kural 81 essentially argues that if you are using your home and your resources exclusively for yourself, you are fundamentally misunderstanding their purpose.
You're missing the point of having them at all?
Exactly.
The householder life, having the job, the house, the resources, is not the end goal. It is merely the mechanism. The actual goal is hospitality.
Yes.
The reason you have a dining room table isn't to admire the wood, it's so other people can sit at it. The reason you have extra food is to give it away. The home is supposed to be an engine of generosity, not a vault for your possessions.
The text views the individual not as an owner, but as a steward. The resources are gathered specifically so they can be dispersed.
But it's not enough to just give someone a meal or a place to sleep. It's all about how you do it. And this next verse, wow, it has one of the most beautiful and delicate metaphors I think I've ever read about human feelings.
But that kind of makes you wonder, right? What exactly is an anicham flower? Because that's the whole key to this verse.
Okay, so the anicham is this legendary flower in Tamil literature. And it's famous for being so incredibly delicate that if you just smell it, it wilts.
மோப்பக்குழையும் அனிச்சம் முகந்தெறிந்து நோக்கக்குழையும் விருந்து.
The Kural uses that unbelievable image to say that a guest's heart is just as fragile. A single sour look from a host is enough to make their spirit just wither. It is an absolutely breathtaking lesson in empathy.
What's fascinating here is how the author uses this hypersensitive botanical specimen to illustrate the emotional fragility of a guest.
Yeah, think about the inherent vulnerability of being a guest in someone else's home.
You are outside your own territory. You don't know the rules of the house, and you are entirely relying on their generosity.
You're at their mercy.
You are. Just as the anitum flower wilts from a mere breath, a guest's spirit wilts instantly if the host shows even a fraction of a cold, unwelcoming, or sour look.
And you don't even have to say anything rude. You don't have to insult them or refuse them a meal. Just a slight tightening of your eyes, a heavy sigh, a micro frown of annoyance that they showed up 5 minutes early.
That is all it takes.
The guest perceives that microscopic shift in your facial expression, and their comfort is destroyed. It really underscores the intense emotional responsibility of being a host.
It really was.
It is not just about putting a plate of food in front of someone. It is about providing genuine, warm, emotionally safe space.
There is this one couplet from chapter 10 that really stood out to me. The transliteration is Inya ulavaka innada kokural kani irupa kaikavarn datru. It compares the words we choose to use to the fruit we choose to eat.
Kural 100. That is a brilliant one.
Yeah, the English translation essentially states that speaking harsh words when sweet ones are near is like choosing unripe fruit when perfectly ripe fruit is sitting right within reach.
What's fascinating here is how universally relatable that metaphor is, right?
Yeah.
இனிய உளவாக இன்னாத கூறல் கனியிருப்பக்காய் கவர்ந்தற்று.
Framing human speech in this exact way, the text points out the absurdity of cruelty. Using harsh words isn't just painted as mean, it is painted as fundamentally foolish. You are making an active choice to deal in bitterness when sweetness is readily available to you.
Right. It takes the moral judgment out of it for a second and just looks at the pure logic. Kindness is simply the more logical, pleasant choice for everyone involved. But the text does not shy away from the darker side of how we communicate either.
No, it definitely doesn't.
When it moves into chapter 13, the topic of self-control, it makes a really stark comparison between physical injury and verbal injury. I'm looking at Kural 129 here.
தீயினார் சுட்டப்புண் உள்ளாரும் ஆறாதே நாவினார் சுட்டவடு.
Because it is pointing to a profound psychological truth. Think about the distinction being made here between the physical body and the mind. A burn from a fire is excruciatingly painful, sure, but the human body has a biological mechanism to repair it.
Right. Over time, the tissue regenerates.
Exactly. The physical evidence might fade entirely, but the mind does not regenerate over a deep insult the way skin regenerates over a physical burn. A cruel tongue creates a permanence that echoes in someone's head for years, maybe decades. It highlights the absolute urgent need for careful speech because you are dealing with a weapon that leaves permanent, invisible scars.
And it makes you wonder about the source of those scars. Like, where do those harsh words actually come from?
This text has a very specific answer for that.
It does. It connects this destructive speech directly to its root cause, which is anger. In chapter 31, Kural 304, Nakayum Uvakayum column, it asks if there is any foe like harmful ire, which kills the smile and joyful cheer.
நகையும் உவகையும் கொல்லும் சினத்தின் பகையும் உளவோ பிற.
It categorizes anger as one's greatest enemy, not just an obstacle, but an active enemy that targets your own joy.
That categorization is so important, and we need to look at the why behind it. Why is anger the ultimate enemy? Because it destroys inner peace. It is entirely an inside job.
An inside job. I like that phrasing.
Well, it's true. When you lash out, you might be inflicting that permanent scar on someone else, like we just talked about. But internally, you are fundamentally destroying your own joy.
I hear that, but practically speaking, anger often feels like a protective mechanism. If someone crosses a boundary, anger is the emotion that steps up to defend us. Does the text just expect us to never feel it?
It is less about never feeling the initial spark of the emotion, and more about recognizing what holding on to that rage does to your own mental baseline. The text is very clear that no other foe is as destructive as rage. It is a parasite that feeds on your own happiness. Chapter 11. This is where we get into some really beautiful imagery.
We really do. There is a couplet, Kural 104, Thinaithanai Nandrisainam. It says if someone does you a favor, even if it is as small as a single grain of millet, someone who knows its true value will see it as being as tall as a massive palm tree.
தினைத்துணை நன்றி செய்யினும் பனைத்துணையாக் கொள்வர் பயன் தெரிவார்.
Our source notes provide some really helpful context for this specific visual. So when he does use a metaphor, it is intentionally sharp and designed to be memorable. Here, we see the literary device of poetic impact through contrast. You have this tiny, almost invisible grain of millet contrasted directly against a towering, massive palm tree.
It is a stunning visual. It essentially says that gratitude acts as a magnifying glass.
That is exactly it. The value of a favor isn't determined solely by the objective cost of the action. It is determined by the recipient's worth and their capacity for gratitude.
Kural 108, Nandri Marapadu Nandrandru. It says that you should never forget a kindness done to you, but you should immediately forget any harm or wrong done by others.
நன்றி மறப்பது நன்றன்று நன்றல்லது அன்றே மறப்பது நன்று.
Retain the goodness, drop the negativity.
Right. Now, I have to push back on this a little bit. Immediate forgetting seems almost impossible, maybe even a bit naive. If someone is continually hurting you, isn't immediately forgetting just allowing yourself to become a doormat?
This raises an important question, and it is a very natural modern reaction to this ancient advice. But we have to look at how the text defines moral failure. The notes explain that failing to remember good deeds is viewed as a severe breakdown of your own moral character.
It's deeper than just bad manners.
Much deeper. It isn't just about failing to write a thank you note. It is a fundamental flaw in how you view the world. On the flip side, the necessity of letting go of negativity, forgetting the wrongs at once, is tied right back to what we just discussed about anger being an inside job.
So holding on to the wrong is just feeding the enemy.
Precisely. If you hold on to the wrong, you let that person's bad behavior occupy rent-free space in your mind, which kills your joyful cheer. Forgetting the wrong isn't about letting the other person off the hook. It is about protecting your own mental hygiene. Gratitude and forgiveness are presented here as two sides of the exact same coin of moral preservation.
Chapter 13, Kural 121, Adakam Amarul Ukam, it says self-control sets a person among the gods, while a lack of it drives them into profound darkness. It paints a very stark picture of what happens when we let our impulses steer the ship.
அடக்கம் அமரருள் உய்க்கும் அடங்காமை ஆரிருள் உய்த்துவிடும்.
And if you look at the structure of that specific verse, it is a perfect example of how the text utilizes balance and duality to drive its points home. Our notes highlight that almost every Kural structurally balances two opposing ideas.
Like cause and effect.
Yes, you constantly see action paired with consequence, or love paired with pain. Here it is the classic virtue and vice construct. The virtue of self-control leads to literal divine elevation. The vice, which is the lack of control, leads to deep, inescapable darkness. The symmetry makes the text structurally beautiful, but it also creates a linguistic balance that perfectly mirrors the moral balance he is trying to teach the reader.
Kural 131 says that decorum brings dignity and greatness, and therefore it has to be guarded and preserved with even greater care than your own life.
ஒழுக்கம் விழுப்பம் தரலான் ஒழுக்கம் உயிரினும் ஓம்பப்படும்.
Think about that for a second. Guarding your conduct more fiercely than your actual heartbeat.
It's an intense standard. So, what does this all mean? How do we possibly apply this life or death level of decorum when things get messy out in the real world, specifically when other people are actively trying to tear us down?
That is the ultimate test of decorum, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is easy to have right conduct when everyone is being pleasant, but the text provides a framework for tolerance in chapter 16 that answers your question. If you are guarding your right conduct more carefully than your life, how do you handle a direct insult? The text uses another brilliant metaphor in Kural 151, akasvarith thangam dilempalath. It says that just as the earth bears those who dig into it, great souls endure those who insult them.
அகழ்வாரை தாங்கும் நிலம் போலத் தம்மை இகழ்வார் பொறுத்தல் தலை.
Just as the earth bears those who dig into it. That is profound.
Think about the physical reality of the earth beneath our feet. People dig into it, they scar it, they fracture it with heavy machinery. And what does the earth do?
That just takes it.
It bears the weight. It does not retaliate. It continues to physically support the very people who are digging into it. The text advises that bearing with those who insult or despise you is the absolute highest virtue. You aren't reacting to their frantic digging. You are simply remaining solid. You become unshakable like the ground itself.
It completely reframes what tolerance looks like. Enduring an insult isn't a sign of weakness. It is a display of foundational strength. You are being as solid as a planet. I'm looking at Kural 158 and Kural 314 together because they really share a theme here. It says that a person should conquer those who wrong them with arrogance through forbearance.
மிகுதியான் மிக்கவை செய்தாரை தாந்தம் தகுதியான் வென்றுவிடல்.
And then it adds that the way to truly punish those who harm you is to shame them by doing them a good deed.
இன்னாசை தாரை ஒருத்தல் அவர் நாண நன்னயன் செய்துவிடல்.
So you conquer arrogance with patience, and you punish harm by overwhelming it with undeniable goodness.
If we connect this to the bigger picture laid out in our source notes, this is an essential lesson on maintaining your dignity and your moral superiority when you are facing deeply unjust treatment. The text is actively advocating for a calm, inborn patience over the frantic, impulsive desire for revenge.
I really appreciate how it flips the entire concept of punishment upside down. Usually we think of punishment as hurting someone back so they feel the pain they caused us. But this text says, no, you punish them by being so completely unbotheredly good that they are forced to feel shame for their own actions. Their own conscience becomes the punishment.
This concludes Autumn section. That concludes the Kural examples of Autumn. This is only a glimpse of 38 chapters in Autumn section. Hopefully, this triggers your curiosity to dive deep into Autumn section. Now let's look at few Kural examples of Porul section, which is the largest, containing 70 chapters. What wealth, Porul, really means. At first glance, Porul may seem to refer to material wealth, but in the Thirukkural, it is far broader. It deals with governance and statecraft, social order and justice, leadership and administration, war, diplomacy and alliances, ethics in public life. Porul is not about accumulating wealth. It is about creating, managing, and sustaining a just society where wealth can exist ethically. Wealth is meaningful only when it is created and used in a just and ethical way. The core idea of Porul section are 1. Good leadership. A ruler must be wise, just, and compassionate. Power should serve the people. 2. Justice. Fairness and law are essential for a stable and prosperous society. 3. Right administration. Ministers and advisors should be knowledgeable, honest, and capable. 4. Economy and work. Wealth should be earned ethically. Agriculture and productive labor are valued. 5. Diplomacy and war. Peace is preferred. War should be a last resort and guided by ethics. 6. Social responsibility. Citizens should practice honesty, gratitude, and cooperation. Without further ado, now let's look at some examples of section wealth.
We are starting with Kural 391, which comes from chapter 40, simply titled Learning.
A very straightforward title.
Yeah, but the poetic structure of this is majestic. I'm looking at the Tamil transliteration here, and the phonetic repetition is, well, it's quite a mouthful, but it really rolls off the tongue.
Let's hear it.
Okay, I'll try my best. It goes, Karka kasadarak karpavai karfropinirka adhorkuth tagga.
கற்க கசடர கற்பவை கற்றபின் நிற்க அதற்குத் தக.
That was actually pretty good.
I know I'm probably not doing the pronunciation perfect justice, but
Yeah.
what exactly is he saying here? Can you break down those words for us?
I'd be happy to because the word choice is incredibly deliberate. So karka means to learn. Kasadara means flawlessly or without defect.
Right.
Karpa vai refers to what is to be learned. Katrepa means after learning. Nirka means to stand by it or live by it.
Stand by it. Got it.
Right, and then Authorkuth means to that, and Thaga means worthy.
So how does that flow in English?
When you bring it all together, the English translation reads, "Let a man learn thoroughly whatsoever he may learn. Let his conduct be worthy of his learning." We think consuming information is the same as acquiring wisdom, but this Kural tells us that learning flawlessly, even if you perfectly memorize the concepts, is only step one.
It's just a prerequisite.
Exactly. The ultimate goal, the true measure of wisdom, is the nirka, the standing by it. It is acting in alignment with that knowledge. If your daily conduct isn't worthy of the things you've learned, then you haven't really achieved true wisdom at all.
In chapter 43, Thiruvalluvar gives us Kural 4:23. The translation is so powerful. It says, "In whatever matter and from whomever hear, wisdom will witness its true meaning."
எப்பொருள் யார் யார்வாய் கேட்பினும் அப்பொருள் மெய்ப்பொருள் காண்பத்தறிவு.
Yes.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to navigate today's media landscape?
It is arguably the most vital survival skill for the modern era of information overload. We are constantly bombarded with opinions, news, and advice.
Nonstop.
The core message here is that true intelligence requires separating the message from the messenger. You have to be able to listen to anyone, literally anyone, and analyze the content strictly for its inherent truth.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
Yeah.
But think about modern echo chambers on social media. If I see an avatar of someone who belongs to a political or social group I fundamentally disagree with, my instinct is to immediately scroll past or roll my eyes. I'm judging the book by the author.
And that is human nature, but it is the opposite of wisdom. This Kural warns against accepting information blindly just because a speaker has a great reputation. Let's talk about taking action.
Right, so Kural 467 states, "Think and dare a proper deed. Dare and think is bad in need."
எண்ணித் துணிக கருமம் துணிந்த பின் எண்ணுவம் என்பது இழுக்கு.
This is the ultimate warning against the foolishness of the think later mentality. In a modern corporate culture that constantly praises moving fast and breaking things, this ancient wisdom serves as a massive stop sign.
A reality check on hustle culture.
Absolutely. Starting a task without thorough deliberation, assuming you'll just figure it out as you go, doesn't lead to innovation, it leads to ruin.
I see this all the time with startups or even just personal projects. People get a burst of motivation, they launch a website, they quit their job, and then 2 weeks later they realize they have no business model.
Right.
They dared, and then they tried to think.
And by then, the damage is done. It ties right back to the idea of flawless learning we discussed earlier. And arguably, the most dangerous place to act without thinking isn't on a battlefield or in a boardroom, but behind a microphone.
You are so right. The way we communicate requires the highest level of deliberation. Let's look at Kural 657, which is all about the power of speech.
சொலல் வல்லன் சோர்விலன் அஞ்சான் அவனை இகழ்வெல்லல் யார்க்கும் அறிதல்.
The translation is striking. A mindful, fearless master of words for anyone to overcome.
The synthesis in this Kural is brilliant. It portrays persuasive, flawless communication not just as a soft skill, like being a good conversationalist at a dinner party, but as an unbeatable strategic advantage.
It's an offensive capability.
Yes. Notice the specific traits highlighted. Eloquent, tireless, and fearless. An eloquent speaker who doesn't tire and speaks without fear can rarely be defeated. It makes it nearly impossible for enemies or rivals to confront such a person effectively.
It really reframes public speaking or negotiation. It's not a chore, it's a superpower. If you master your words, you become an immovable force.
A force of nature, really.
And the imagery around the power of words gets even more intense a few chapters later. Here's where it gets really interesting. In Kural 872, focusing on knowing an enemy, Thiruvalluvar writes, "Oppose warriors who plow with bows, not those who plow with words." I just cannot get over that phrase, plow with words.
வில்லேர் உழவர் பகை கொளினும் கொள்ளற்க சொல்லேர் உழவர் பகை.
It is an incredibly evocative metaphor. If we connect this to the bigger picture, specifically back to the previous Kural about the fearless speaker, we see a clear escalation.
How so?
The advice is highly strategic. Avoid making enemies of people who use words as their weapons. The power of speech, the ability to shape narratives, persuade masses, and dismantle arguments is fundamentally more dangerous and far-reaching than physical weapons.
Think about what plowing actually means. A bow can only strike what is directly in front of it. It's a localized threat.
Right.
But plowing is turning over the soil of the landscape.
Right.
Someone who plows with words is planting seeds, ideas, narratives, doubts that will grow and harvest long after they finish speaking.
That's a great way to put it.
They can change the entire reality of a situation. You do not want to accidentally pick a fight with someone who plows with words because you weren't thinking clearly.
It's a fight you will likely lose.
This all feels very strategic, very tactical. But that brings us to our third theme, which shifts gears entirely. We are moving from external strategy to internal character.
The core of who we are.
Exactly. We are exploring the uncompromising nature of ethics and the instinct of friendship. And let's start with the most challenging Kural in the entire stack. Kural 656, on purity in action. The translation reads, "Though you watch your mother starve, do nothing the rise condemn."
ஈன்றாள் பசிகாண்பான் ஆயினுன் செய்யற்க சான்றோர் பழிக்கும் வினை.
It is a very heavy line.
Okay, let's unpack this because I have to push back here. On the surface, that is an incredibly extreme, almost cruel statement.
Definitely sounds that way.
Watching your mother starve is arguably the most desperate human situation imaginable. Are we really saying that if I have to steal a loaf of bread to save my own mother's life, I shouldn't do it? Let my mother starve. That sounds incredibly harsh, especially for a philosophy that also praises deep instinctive empathy. How do we reconcile that level of rigidity?
I completely understand the visceral reaction to that. It is extreme, and that is entirely the point. This Kural isn't necessarily giving you legalistic advice for grocery store theft. It is providing the ultimate philosophical baseline for ethical purity. The logic here is that the deeds despised by the wise actions rooted in deep corruption, cruelty, or fundamental immorality stain the soul in a way that not even the noblest excuse can wash away.
Yeah.
If you allow yourself to say, well, I had to do something terrible because my circumstances were dire, you create a loophole. And once that loophole exists, human nature will use it for less and less dire situations.
That makes a lot of sense.
First, it's to save a starving mother. Next, it's to save your business from bankruptcy. Then it's just to hit a quarterly target. By setting the absolute extreme boundary, your own mother's starvation, the text establishes that true integrity has zero gray area. It sets an impossibly high standard for greatness.
Let's balance that intensity. Let's move to a much lighter but equally profound topic: how we treat the people we love. We have two Kurals on friendship. Let's look at Kural 788 first. It gives us this beautiful, highly relatable analogy. Like the hand that moves reflexively when the dress slips, a friend reacts swiftly to remove a woe.
உடுக்க இழந்தவன் கைபோல ஆங்கே இடுக்கண் களைவதாம் நட்பு.
The brilliance of this real-world analogy cannot be overstated. Think about the physical mechanics of what happens if your clothing slips in public or you trip. Your hand shoots out to cover yourself or catch your fall before your brain even consciously processes the embarrassment or the danger.
It's an involuntary reaction.
Exactly. It is an autonomic reflex. This Kural is arguing that true friendship operates on that exact same level of biological instinct.
I love this because it's so incredibly practical.
A true friend doesn't weigh the pros and cons of helping you. They don't check their schedule to see if they have the emotional bandwidth to care about your problem. It is an immediate, instinctive reflex to rescue you when you are in distress.
Kural 783 feels specifically tailored for you, the learner listening to this right now. The translation is, friendship with the noble grows sweeter each time we meet, like a cherished book reread.
நவில்தொறும் நூல் நயம் போலும் பயில்தொறும் பண்புடையாளர் தொடர்பு.
Just as a truly great book reveals new layers of meaning and insight the more you engage with it, a good friendship grows more delightful with every interaction.
That concludes the Kural examples of wealth, Kural. This is only a bird's eye view of 70 chapters in wealth section. Hopefully this triggers your curiosity to dive deep into wealth section. Now let's look at a few Kural examples of love, Inbam section, which contains 25 chapters. Love section focuses on romantic love and emotional relationships, exploring the feelings between lovers. Unlike Aram, ethics, and Kural, society, Inbam focuses on the inner world of individuals, making it intensely personal and introspective. Main themes include union, joy, and happiness of being together, separation, pain, longing, and missing the beloved. Emotions. Love includes desire, anxiety, hope, and fulfillment. Inner feelings. Focuses on personal emotions rather than social rules. Valluvar shifts from external order, Poral, to internal experience, Inbam. This makes the love section an early form of psychological literature. The love section follows classical Tamil agam interior poetics. Feelings are implied, not directly stated. Nature is used symbolically. Conversations are indirect. Example patterns: rain equals longing, night equals secrecy, birds equals messengers. Unlike Aram, no direct moral instruction, no preaching about right or wrong. Yet ethics is present indirectly, such as loyalty, emotional honesty, and mutual respect. Valluvar suggests that true love naturally contains its own ethics. Aram, virtue, governs conduct. Poral, wealth, governs society. Inbam, love, governs the heart. Inbam reveals the inner universe of love, where emotion, desire, and consciousness intertwine to define human experience. Inbam is the most poetic part of the Thirukkural because it transforms brief couplets into vivid expressions of human emotion and love. Without further ado, now let's look at some examples of section love.
Our goal is to see how the Inbathu Pal tracks the entire progression of a relationship, from the very beginning to the end.
The whole arc.
Yeah. We're talking about the trajectory from that very first neurologically chaotic glance.
Oh, absolutely chaotic.
All the way to the absolute structural collapse of separation.
The text frames this phase beautifully around the concept of non-verbal communication.
இருநோக்கு இவள் உண்கண் உள்ளது ஒரு நோக்கு நோய் நோக்கொன் ரன்னோய் மருந்து.
The English translation of this verse reads, "Two looks in her eye-lined eyes, one that brings illness and one that heals it."
Just incredible imagery there.
The imagery is striking. The author is describing a lover closely observing the coal-lined eyes of his beloved.
No.
But he isn't just admiring her makeup.
Oh.
He's observing a dual-natured glance.
You experience a racing heart, sweaty palms, intrusive thoughts.
A literal inability to focus on anything else.
Right. That is a physiological state of disease.
The lover in the verse is caught in a closed loop.
A very tight loop.
If she looks away or ignores him, he is physically unwell with longing and anxiety.
The illness.
The illness.
Yeah.
But when she finally returns his gaze, that same look delivers the dopamine hit that instantly regulates his nervous system.
It's the cure.
It's the cure. The person who is causing the absolute chaos in your nervous system is the only one equipped to settle it.
It is the ultimate paradox of early attachment.
Which brings us to the sheer inefficiency of language in these moments. The text builds on this idea of silent power in Kural 1100.
A great follow-up.
கண்ணொடு கண்ணினை நோக்கொக்கின் வாய்ச்சொற்கள் என்ன பயனுமில்ல.
The translation argues that when eye to answering eye reveals the tale of love, all words that lips can say must useless prove.
It's a blunt dismissal of spoken language.
Entirely blunt. Words are useless.
Think about the modern equivalent of this. I mean, think about it right now, sitting here. We have all experienced the agony of staring at a blinking cursor on a phone screen.
Oh, trying to draft a text message?
Yes, to someone you have intense feelings for. You type it out, you delete it 20 times.
You try to find the exact combination of words to convey nuance and humor.
And vulnerability. It is exhausting, and it usually falls flat.
It really does.
But if you are standing across a room from that same person and you simply locked eyes for 2 seconds, the amount of data transferred in that silent exchange would eclipse anything you could ever type.
Language really is a clumsy tool when the stakes are that high. And Kural 1117 features a comparison to the moon.
அருவாய் நிறைந்த அவிர்மதிக்குப் போல மறுவுண்டோ மாதர் முகத்து.
Now, comparing a beautiful face to the moon is perhaps one of the oldest, most worn-out poetic devices in human history.
Especially in classical literature, it's everywhere.
But the author sets up this familiar trope specifically to tear it down. The verse asks, "Are there spots on my love's face, like the spots on the shining moon?"
It is a wonderfully subversive piece of writing. In classical Sangam literature, nature is typically the ultimate benchmark for beauty and order.
Right. Nature is flawless.
The lover starts down that traditional path. Your face is as bright as the moon, but then catches himself. He introduces logic into the romance.
Which is dangerous.
Very. He realizes the moon is actually deeply flawed. It has dark craters. It's inconsistent, waxing and waning every month.
While his beloved's face, in his mind, suffered from none of those defects. He uses the grandest object in the night sky just to casually knock it down a peg and declare it the loser in a beauty contest against his partner. Kural 11:27 switches the perspective. We hear from the female speaker, and she makes a highly specific declaration about her daily routine.
A seemingly mundane routine.
Right. She refuses to wear eye makeup. The translation notes she refuses to paint her eyes with kohl. And the reasoning she gives is mind-blowing.
It's so profound.
She says, "My lover in my eyes abides. I paint them not lest he hides."
கண்ணுள்ளார் காதல் அவராக கண்ணும் எழுதேம் கரப்பாக்க அறிந்து.
She is claiming her lover physically dwells within her eyes, and she is terrified that applying makeup might obscure or hide him. And Kural 11:22 makes this absolute uncompromising claim. It states, "Love between me and this lady is like bond between soul and body."
உடம்பொடு உயிரிடை எண்ணமற்றன்ன மடந்தையொடு எம்மிடை நட்பு.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is establishing the ultimate stakes of a truly fused partnership. This framework leaves no room for casual detachment.
None.
The bond between soul and body is the singular prerequisite for human life. If you sever the soul from the body, the result isn't just an inconvenience or a period of sadness. The result is immediate catastrophic death.
The speaker is stating that their love is the literal adhesive holding his physical and spiritual existence together. She is his life force. This brings us to Kural 11:25.
உள்ளுவன் மன்யான் மரப்பின் மரப்பரியேன் ஒள்ளமர் கண்ணாள் குணம்.
Which deals with the sheer impossibility of forgetting.
A very painful reality.
The lover admits, "I might recall if I could once forget, but from my heart her charms fade not." And then, out of nowhere, he describes her eyes with a jarring phrase. He says they gleam like the warrior's dart. It points out a fundamental truth about human memory.
Which is?
You can only remember something if it occasionally slips out of your active consciousness. But because she is a permanent, relentless fixture in his mind, like a dart embedded in his chest, the very concept of remembering her is obsolete.
That makes perfect sense.
You don't remember you are breathing. It is just your permanent state of being.
And that permanence is what sets the stage for the final devastating reality explored in this text. If the beloved is your source, your lens on reality, and the permanent occupant of your mind,
Right.
What happens when that person is removed from the equation?
It brings us to the inevitable pain of chapter 116, plainly titled, Pain of Separation. Kural 11:51 delivers an emotional ultimatum that is hard to read even centuries later.
It's gut-wrenching.
The speaker is facing the imminent departure of their partner, and they deliver these lines. "Tell me if you are not leaving. Bid farewell to those who can survive to see your return."
செல்லாமை உண்டேல் எனக்குரை மற்றுனின் வல்வரவு வாழ்வார்க்குரை.
The psychological realism here is staggering. The speaker is completely rejecting the socially acceptable, hollow comfort of, "I'll be back soon."
They don't want to hear it.
They are plainly stating that they lack the psychological architecture to survive the absence.
They are essentially saying, if you are staying, we can have a conversation. But if you are leaving, do not say goodbye to me, say goodbye to someone else, because the version of me that exists independently of you no longer survives.
That's incredibly heavy.
The promise of a safe return is utterly useless to a person who is actively bleeding out.
That concludes Inbom's section. We looked at, analyzed about 30 Kurals out of 1,330. It's just the beginning of a long journey. Hopefully, you were able to appreciate the greatness of these 7-word couplets that shares so much wisdom and beauty. The Kural demonstrates how Tamil can be at once poetic and precise. Every word is chosen carefully, every syllable purposeful. There is no excess, no ornamentation for its own sake. Yet the verses carry rhythm, balance, and musical beauty that linger in the mind long after reading. What makes Thiruvalluvar's legacy immortal is his deep understanding of human nature. He speaks to both the individual and the collective, guiding us to balance personal virtues, desires with societal responsibilities. Ultimately, the true beauty of the Thirukkural is this. It does not demand perfection, but invites reflection. Each Kural is a mirror, showing us who we are and who we can become. Thiruvalluvar's life and work are a beacon of wisdom that will continue to illuminate the hearts and minds of people for generations to come. Thanks for listening. Have a nice day.
Valluvar's words on the ocean shore, a timeless wisdom forevermore. On Adam, Poral, and Inbam's way, the Thirukkural guides us still today. A universal truth in every line, a human blueprint truly